Alright, welcome to the channel. My name is James and today I'm going to walk you through how I paint dark skin tones. We're going to be using a lot of glazes, filters and basic color theory to create some realistic detail and information within the skin, so let's get into it. Alright, I'll be walking you through how I painted this dark skin tone for Garrix Reavers, and for this you'll need a handful of paints. You'll need some Rhinox hide, some Bugman's glow, Moonray flesh, copper brown from the Vallejo Xpress range, gloomy violet, Pallid green and velvet red from the Xpress range. All the paints will be listed below in the description along with the Games Workshop equivalents. So starting from the Zenithal Prime, where I've primed the model in black and then shot grey from the direction of the light, we're going to take a mix of copper brown and gloomy violet and apply that all over the model. Whenever you're painting these darker skin tones, there's generally a lot of blues and purples that come through, so that's why we've mixed those two contrast paints. We're then going to use some Rhinox hide just to block in the big muscle bellies and define the light source across the model. On the rear of the model you'll see that I sort of feather out the Rhinox hide towards the darker areas of the model where the black was from the Zenithal Prime. I'm doing this because I want a strong directional light across my model, but if you're not aiming for that, then just apply these steps all over the miniature. And then with roughly a 60-40 mix of Rhinox hide and Bugman's glow, we're going to start blocking in the main areas of light and defining some muscle bellies. Really focused on the large volumes here and not the individual details within the musculature at this point. We're then going to add a small amount of Moonray flesh into that mix. This is to start establishing the highlights and refining the overall lighting pattern across the model. Again, I'm not too worried about defining individual striations or bringing out too much detail within the musculature at this point, really just focusing on establishing that light and starting to create some definition within those larger volumes. Now you'll see I even placed this highlight colour into some of the recesses between the muscles. That's because they're getting hit directly by the light, or they're sort of perpendicular to the light source, so even those recessed areas you can help to define the musculature and the shape of the model by introducing highlights in those places. And whenever I'm placing these highlights, I'm always leaving some of the previous layer showing, roughly about 30% of it, give or take, and then sort of feathering out some of those edges into the previous layer, just to help soften out those transitions and create that more natural look within the skin. It's always worth remembering that whenever the light enters the skin, it's going to bounce around and then it's going to reflect out, so you always get these more diffuse and softer reflection patterns within the skin, and that's why it's important to create these softer, smoother transitions through the colours and through the values. So again, we're adding more Moonray flesh into the mix, increasing the values so we can really start to define the individual muscle bellies across the model. Again, I'm not too worried about creating striations within the musculature at this point. Granted, with this sculpt there are some, clearly defined striations within the chest because the musculature is stretched in this area and you would be able to see them, but for the most part, not too worried about it, really just focusing on creating definition within those individual volumes and the individual muscles now within the model. So again, increasing the value by adding more Moonray flesh into the mix, we're going to start to draw more attention to the striations and the details within each of the muscles. So again, I'm really focusing on the lighting direction, how the light's interacting with the different surfaces and the different muscles across the model. But if you're not too worried about creating that directional light, then just apply this to all areas of the model. And you can see I'm continuing to increase the value in that sort of recess between the traps and the chest, sort of roughly where the clavicle would be or where the collarbone would be on the model, just to help create some more separation and definition by using light. And we're now starting to add some definition into the abdominals. Previously I was just highlighting these as one sort of complete volume, but now we're just adding in some additional detail. And at this point we're pretty much at a Moonray flesh dominant mix, so I'm just adding in the brightest highlights across the model. You can see I'm picking out the chin and the jaw as well. Now if your model's not wearing a helmet, be sure to draw attention towards the forehead, the brow bone, the cheekbones and the jawline as well as the chin. Those are prime focal areas within the face and somewhere where you want to increase the value to help define those structures and shapes. And at this point you can really start to define the striations and additional details within the muscles as well. So think about how the muscles are stretched, how they're contracted, whether or not you would be able to see the striations across the model as well. You want to keep that more natural look here and not overemphasize too many of the striations, especially in areas that will retain more fat. If you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit that like. It really helps to promote the video and helps the channel grow. And if you're feeling frisky, don't forget to give that subscribe a wee slap and a tickle. You can also drop a comment below to help please the algorithm. Now we've pushed the values super high across the model, so now it's time to introduce some more color variation and information within the skin. So we're starting off with some Pallid green. We're going to use this to neutralize some of those warmer tones within the shadows across the model. So thin this down to kind of a glaze or a filter consistency and just brushing it from the brighter areas into the shadows. I've thinned some velvet red down into a glaze consistency again, and we're going to use this to add some more warmth to the vital organs and areas across the model where there might be some pump, inflammation, damage, trauma to the skin. Plenty of opportunities to introduce those warmer tones and add in additional detail. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, there's generally a lot of those colder tones within these dark skin tones, so you want to introduce some purple, maybe even some blue in some places. And again, I've sort of thinned that down to a glaze or a wash consistency. I'm just introducing it into the shadows and across some other areas of the model, just to add in some tonal variation within the piece. Now as we've pushed our highlights to basically 11, we've really pumped the value up. We need to re-establish some of those darker tones, so I'm mixing that copper brown and gloomy violet together again into a filter-like consistency. So I've added quite a lot of water here to thin it down. And we're going to apply it over the model as a filter. So whenever I'm doing this, I'll load up my brush, I'll wick off the excess on a paper towel, and then I'll pull from the lighter areas into the shadows. This will help to create a smooth and natural gradient from the highlights into the shadows, and also help you control the amount of pigment that you're applying to the model. Once you've built this up over a few layers, you'll end up with something that looks a bit like this. And now we just have to re-establish some of the brightest points within the skin. These are areas where you want to focus the attention or draw attention within the model. So I'm adding some additional highlights up around the face, into the pecs, into the biceps, into parts of the forearms, just to help draw the focus towards the top of the model and around the face. Whenever you're doing this stage, you want to work with semi-transparent or translucent layers. That way you can create that softer gradient and build it up over multiple passes, again giving you that softer, more diffuse reflection pattern that you would expect from skin. Last but not least, we got to draw some attention to the scars and trauma within the skin, so I'm using some Bugman's Glow just to add in some dot highlights across those and just help to create some variation within the skin tones there. Now let's get them on the spinny thing and have a look at the final piece. So when it's all said and done, you can see that we've created these nice soft gradients within the skin, but been able to build them up to quite a high value to draw attention to the details and the structure of the musculature. Following that with the filter layers, we've been able to reintroduce that pigmentation and that colour in the skin, while still retaining those highlights and not ending up with something that looks too desaturated. And using those subtle underpaintings of the green, red and purple creates a lot of tonal variation and a lot of additional information. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, questions or suggestions for future videos, please drop them below in the comments. And if you want to show me what you've been working on, head on over to the Discord and drop some pics into the whips or the completed projects. I'd love to see what you've been painting. If you'd like to get some personalised coaching and tuition, head on over to the Patreon and check out the available packages. There'll be something there to suit everybody. All links can be found below in the description. Thank you again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you at the next one.